The following is a presentation of KSL Sports. First and 12. A total roundup of this weekend's BYU football and the new look Big 12 Conference. First and 12 is sponsored by Macy's Grocery Store. Your hosts are Mitch Harper and Alex Kirry on KSL News Radio and the KSL Sports Zone.
Hour number 2 is off and running on this Sunday morning. Hope all of you enjoyed your Week 6 action of Big 12 football. Mitch Harper, Alex Kirry, every single week, First and 12, from 10 to noon here on KSL News Radio and the KSL Sports Zone, and available on all podcasts. Alex, it's time for everyone's favorite segment, the controversial Big 12 Power Rankings.
The Big 12 Power Rankings Big Board. A weekly rank of all 12 programs, from the elite to the bottom dwellers.
All right, so here's what it looks like. Tons of movement on this thing. And there's still going to be people that are going to be grumpy about where we have teams. Maybe you want to see BYU go a little higher up. But let's start off with the inevitable there. The two best teams in the Big 12. Swapping spots for the first time this year. And I don't know if did we have Texas at the very top the entire time until this week, Mitch? So they've been number one all year. I think Kansas State had maybe been a number 2, maybe at the very beginning. We weren't really buying into the Oklahoma storyline. But Dylan Gabriel and the Oklahoma Sooners get it done down in Texas yesterday in the Red River rivalry, and you've got yourself a swapping in the number 1 and number 2 spot. Texas at number 2, Oklahoma at number 1 now, and the Sooners well-deserved, of course, to be at the top of the list right now.
No question. I mean, they are the best team in the league, and they're now in a position, Alex, to where they could be in the college football playoff. And it'll be interesting to see how a playoff committee, if it gets to that point where, you know, Oklahoma maybe drops a game in the regular season, and
they look at that weak schedule at the beginning of the year. Is that
how
what
they
you're gonna say?
How they view a one-loss Oklahoma team potentially if it gets to that point. I would imagine they'd be in the playoff, but still, it's an interesting thought with them. Well,
and you know, you look at it too, and you have to go, all right, so what are these teams really? What is Texas really? What is Quinn Ewers really? It's still kind of early, but at the same time, like, how many games do we need?
Mid-season point right now.
I know. Everybody's got 5 games, 6 games under their belt, and they've got to figure it out. Now, the question is going to be, and of course, the AP poll comes right after our show ends on a Sunday. So where do they end up when the rankings come out here in the next 45 minutes here, Mitch? Where do you put Oklahoma now, who I think was 12 this past week, and then Texas was 3. People weren't buying into Texas being number 1, but my heavens, they still got double-digit votes in the number 1 spot because Georgia looked kind of weak last week. It was the most diverse spread of first-place votes that we'd seen in a long time. So where do you end up putting Oklahoma, or where do you think they're going to end up after today's AP poll comes out?
I'd probably have Oklahoma at 5 and then put Texas at 6 or 7.
Whoa!
I think you keep Texas pretty high in that top 10. That was a great football game.
That was awesome.
I think you put Oklahoma in that top 5 spot.
Okay. So as we get things going here, let's go down to number 3. Now that you know number 1 and number 2. Number 3, a shock considering where we had them at the beginning of the year, and certainly shouldn't be a shock although it is a shock because the guy who's supposed to be taking them to this place is not even playing that much. Kansas at number 3 after a blowout win over UCF.
Yeah, for back-to-back 5-1 starts for the Jayhawks. First time that's happened since 2008. It's good times with Lance Leipold. You just wonder, though, if he's going to, flirt around with that Michigan State job. He's kind of been linked to that. If they can keep him in Lawrence, he just continues to do a fantastic job. Number 4, this is where we had some controversy, Alex.
Some bickering.
We had a moment where we considered BYU, but ultimately we go with the West Virginia Mountaineers at number 4, who has exceeded everyone's expectations for them. Neil Brown, probably off the hot seat. I mean, he's got to get to bowl eligibility at least still, and you got to go get that 6th win. But the Mountaineers in a great spot. They're at number 4 in this week's Power Rankings. You feel good about that?
Listen, I fought BYU fans. I mean, Mitch was just digging in. I couldn't get a word in edgewise on this thing. No, I think we both kind of decided if you're going to have a couple of one-loss teams right there between BYU and West Virginia has done more than enough to first shush the naysayers, right? but also their only loss this year has come to Penn State. So you look at it and you go, man, they've been taking care of business the games they're supposed to. They didn't get absolutely blown out by Penn State either. So I think West Virginia has done enough right now to stay in that spot. But talk about an absolute shock right now between 3 and 5. Kansas, West Virginia, BYU. That's the BYU spot, though, at 5. You feel comfortable putting them ahead of everybody else? I certainly do.
Yeah, I feel good because their only loss is to Kansas. And, Kansas, their lone loss was to Texas. I mean, I just think that the way that Kansas dominated UCF, I thought, I hate when fans kind of go, well, now I feel better about BYU's loss because Kansas destroyed UCF. So that makes me feel better about 11-point loss.
Like
a loss is a loss.
It's like my kid last night talking about Arkansas, and he goes, well, Arkansas is garbage. That wasn't a good win. And I go, hey, settle down. This is not how it works. It's not this transitive property wins and losses situation, although fans certainly play that game quite often, especially on a Sunday.
They definitely do. Number 6, hey, we had left this team near the bottom for a minute, but they're on the come up once again. Joey McGuire and the Texas Tech Raiders checking in at number 6 after a 2-game win streak.
And what's interesting too is they're on the scary list now on teams. It was already going to be a tough prospect when the Red Raiders come into Provo this year, but now it's looking more and more difficult because they've kind of come around, just like you said. McGuire's got his guys dialed up. This is a pretty dang good team. This was a team that people had. We thought they were going to be in that 2 or 3 spot maybe at the front end of this season here. They've had to climb into that 6 spot for them, but they're in a much better spot than they were last week.
And think about their losses too, Alex. Wyoming,
yes.
Oregon, good football teams. Wyoming beat Fresno yesterday. I mean,
yes.
I know, again, the transitive thing, it's a little bit annoying, but they've lost to good football teams, Texas Tech, so maybe they're just kind of hitting their stride finally, and they're being the team that we thought they would be in the
This
preseason.
league loves to have teams try to figure things out midway through the season and then suddenly be world beaters at the end of this whole thing. Now, a team that has fallen greatly and finds himself now still in the middle of the pack is Kansas State. Man, this is just a team that has got all sorts of problems right now, and it doesn't look like it's going to necessarily just sort of fix itself for Kansas State. They've got a lot of soul-searching to do.
They do, and I just think that they're not as assignment sound, and they're not also the discipline issue too. I mean, it seems like Kansas State is making head-scratching mistakes, and they had 3 turnovers against Oklahoma State. It's just that's not going to work. I mean, that was what led Kansas State to being the Big 12 champ last year was taking care of the football. Will Howard was sound. He was a mess last week. I know he's been banged up the past few weeks, and that's been difficult on him. But if you're going to go 15 of 34 for 152, for completing 44% and 3 INTs,
nope.
I know that you won the Big 12 title last year, but when you got a 4-star waiting in the wings, that seat's got to get a little bit warm for him, I think.
Iowa State. A little bit of a shock at 8, I would think. I mean, but that's where we both agreed to put them, and I think that's where they deserve to be. At 3-3 right now, people had them in the absolute dumpsters, considering that they had to pick up so many pieces in this program with off the field stuff. But Iowa State proving that they are an absolute beast of a defense, and their offense is starting to show up.
That is true. Rocco Becht, this young kid at quarterback, 16 of 28, 138. I like what Iowa State's doing. I feel like it kind of reminds me a little bit of those early Breece Hall, Brock Purdy teams, very young. I mean, this Iowa State team is young, and if they can find success, you look at them long-term down the road in the future 16-team iteration of the league, this could be a nice grouping to build off of. It's a good bounce back, too. After a couple weeks ago, losing to a MAC team in Ohio, that seemed like it was a rock-bottom moment. But once again, bouncing back nicely, Iowa State. Checking in at number 9, Oklahoma State. You talk about bounce backs, Alex. This team, we were pretty low on last week. They were dead last in the power ranking.
Yeah, and you know what? They deserved every bit of that. And then this week, the bounce back has been, this is a team that's climbed the highest in the power rankings this week. I think because you just never want to write off Mike Gundy, although last week we were saying, write this guy off. He's absolutely had his time there in Stillwater. But yeah, the Oklahoma State Cowboys, it was a weird game on Friday, wasn't it? Like, it just felt weird. It felt like neither team was really comfortable playing on a Friday night, and certainly Kansas State looked out of sorts. But I'm watching this thing, and Oklahoma State got that last interception to kind of seal the deal, and the double birds go up from people in the stands, and ESPN has to cut away from all these cowpoke fans with their obscenities, and I'm going, you know what? They're kind of getting on a roll here. hitting the double digits for the first time this year, and I don't know when it's going to get better, but TCU right now, certainly BYU fans are hoping that they're going to stay in this slump right now as the Cougs are set to go down to Fort Worth.
TCU needs to avoid Ames, Iowa at all costs. They've lost 4 straight at Iowa State. Their season seemed to go and die at Iowa State, and it felt like
it wasn't even close either. It was at least 2 touchdowns, and it felt like it should have been. They had the 3-score lead and gave up a late one, and it was even worse than it looked on paper.
Well, and to have Chandler Morris out, that's a bit worrisome. We'll see what happens with that lefty because it looked pretty bad. I mean, he got rolled up underneath him, and without Chandler Morris, there's no Max Duggan waiting in the wings here for TCU. Number 11, Cincinnati, they had a bye week, so kind of staying put, the Bearcats. Got a good D-line, but still kind of have some questions about that offense going forward.
I don't think we have a question about how bad Baylor looks right now. Baylor getting absolutely housed this week. And again, speaking of not being very close, it's one of these games for Baylor where you go, all right, everybody else seems to be having the bounce back. Not so fast for Baylor, who gets absolutely blasted by Texas Tech 39-14. I mean, that was an awful game. It could have been a season turnaround for Texas Tech, and it might show us that Baylor is actually as bad as we may have thought beginning of the year.
Might have to turn up the heat on Dave Aranda's seat, too. It just feels like things are trending.
You have too much power, Mitch. You have too much power. Don't say stuff like that.
You know I love a good hot seat, a good coaching carousel, but it feels like things are slipping fast. It's in free fall. And there's no answers. No Blake Shapen, Sawyer Robertson, a quarterback. There's no clear answer there. And the running backs, where are they? Where is the ground game? When they got Dominic Richardson in the portal, I thought, okay, this is going to be the next stud running back for Baylor. They're going to be the RVO offense for Jeff Grimes. Hasn't been a thing at all. They had less than 50 yards rushing against Texas Tech.
Jeez.
Texas Tech suffocated them. Baylor, they're just fortunate they got these 2 teams that are newcomers below them because they would probably be at the bottom right now. Number 13, UCF, who they lost to Baylor in an epic collapse last week, and that carried over and turned into a second loss as they got thumped by Kansas.
Even with the bye, we still felt Houston did absolutely horribly this week. And is at number 14 on the list. And so the newcomers to the Big 12 right now, BYU carrying the banner for the new teams, at least so far, all the way through. All right, we'll take the break here. We'll come back. We have we've got our Big 12 Sound Roundup coming up around the corner. You're going to be able to hear from the coaches and some of the players, especially when it comes to that Red River rivalry. So stay right here with us. It is 1st and 12 on KSL News Radio and on the KSL Sports Zone. Stay with us.
Read all the stories about BYU sports no one else has heard. Go to KSLSports.com for exclusive columns by BYU insider Mitch Harper. That's KSLSports.com.
You can hear Mitch Harper also tomorrow on Cougar Nation on KSL News Radio, taking phone calls. No game to complain about this week for BYU fans, but certainly they can get ready for this one versus TCU down at Amon Carter Stadium in Fort Worth, where Mitch Harper will be covering the game. Alex Kirry, Mitch Harper, right here with you. Of course, I host Unrivaled during the week with Scott Mitchell on the KSL Sports Zone, and you can hear us from 3 to 6. And then Mitch and I, every week on 1st and 12, as we venture into a very exciting Big 12 season number 1 for BYU. So many things going on, and what we love to do is to jump in on some of the sound that was heard around the conference. It is our Sound Roundup here. Let's get to it.
Big 12 Sound Roundup.
Check 1, 2.
The best bites, cheap shots, and excuses from Saturday's postgame news conferences.
We got to start things off, Alex, down in Dallas from that Red River rivalry. Quarterback Dylan Gabriel had an amazing touchdown pass in the final moments of that game to Nick Anderson. This was Gabriel on that game-winning TD.
Just saw the corner clamp and then seen Nick in the back of the end zone. And, man, that's what we practice, week in and week out. And just proud of everyone coming together, controlling the chaos and just dialing it in. That's big-time football and something you dream of as a little kid. So just being a part of it is something special, especially, with all these guys in that locker room. I love every single one of them. So.
Certainly people, Mitch, are waiting to talk about the other quarterback on the other side of things with the higher-ranked Longhorns and Quinn Ewers with all the attention that comes with him and the possibility of him being a high draft pick in the NFL. But kudos to Oklahoma on the win. They bounced back from an embarrassment last year. Brent Venables coming off of that win. Has to feel good. The hot seat is now cooled completely, at least for now, for Brent Venables as they get ready. Here's what he had to say after the game with that 34-30 win over Texas.
He's the calmest guy I've ever been around at the quarterback position. And he's got great belief in the players around him, incredibly humble. You don't see him ever, tooting his own horn. And, he's always trying to compliment and call someone else up. And but he's prepared. He's worked really, really hard. He's been one of the most consistent players in our program from the leadership and showing up every day with the right mindset and bringing out the best in his teammates. So he was fearless. And again, I don't put any limits on what Dylan can do. And he's playing as confident as anybody on our team right now. And I think he understands the collective parts of the rest of the offense and the defense and the kicking game and doing their part. So really, really proud. And he's just a guy that he's going to find a way to get it done.
Gabriel definitely kind of etched his name among the great Oklahoma quarterbacks. Not quite, Baker Mayfield or Sam Bradford levels, but, man, he's carved out his own little niche.
I'll tell you, the fan base, too, if this game is the thing that means the most to them during the year itself, short of the Big 12 championship game, but
sure.
this isn't just bragging rights. This is like, it's beyond. It's something insane. It's crazy, too. It's a middle-of-the-season game, Mitch, and it's the All-State Red River rivalry game. Like, it is, it's a bowl game. I mean, it is exactly that. It's at the Cotton Bowl. It probably means more, but getting that win is huge. And then on the flip side, you have Steve Sarkisian, who had to take a little bite of the old humble pie here. If he's capable of it, here's what he said after this one. Because they, of course, didn't play their best football, according to him.
Some of it was a little frustrating because it was just out of character for us, and that's the hard part as a coach, that I have to drill back down into of how do I make sure that I have our guys, really ready to go play. And I felt really good about it. I really did. And these guys will tell you I told them the same thing. But that's the life of a competitor and a football team. When you're not at your best, can you find a way to win? And like I said, I thought our guys showed a lot of fight and grit and resiliency to put ourselves in position to win a game when we weren't at our best against a good football team. And, we did that. And so I was really proud of them for that. I was proud of their ability to fight back when we weren't playing great, when the game was kind of slanted. We were kind of playing uphill there for a while. And to get all the way back to have the lead the way that we did, that took a lot of resiliency from this group, and I credit them a lot for that.
The one saving grace, though, for Sark and these Longhorns, Alex, is they got a shot potentially to play Oklahoma again in Arlington. This was Sark on the possibility of a potential rematch against Oklahoma.
Well, I expect us to get back on the horse. We got a locker room full of competitors. This is a tight-knit group. I'm super proud of them for what they bring every single day. I was proud of them today. And so we'll go one game at a time. I think this locker room is full of champions, and our goal is to go win a championship this year. So we got to go handle our business.
Yeah, it's interesting because, you ask them, hey, what do you think? Could you maybe get back and play these guys in the Big 12 championship game? Well, we're going to try to win every dang game. If that's where we end up, then there you go. And certainly it would be from a TV standpoint, from an excitement standpoint, a repeat of the Red River rivalry game in the Big 12 championship game on the last year of them being in the Big 12. It's not the thing that Brett Yormark wants. It's not the thing that Mitch Harper wants. But I'm just one of those old school guys that wants to see this collision course of two Titans. If they are playing the best football, I want to see those two teams playing one another at the end of the year. That's certainly where I want to see them. Speaking of guys who get a little bit salty, and now his team is playing a lot better than they were, Oklahoma State's Mike Gundy, after they've pulled themselves out of the tailspin that they've had. This was him talking about the win that they got this weekend.
I think we just played better, right? We didn't turn the ball over. We won the hidden yards. We gave up really one big play. We got out-leveraged on the quarterback wing run in the boundary. And then they caught us they had a nice call on third and long. They caught us in a pass defense and ran a power read. But other than that, we really played solid on defense. So we didn't make a lot of mistakes. We didn't give up the big throw, right? The last four games, we're giving up the throws that are killing us for touchdowns, and we didn't give that up tonight. And then we were able to put pressure on him in the end of the third and the fourth quarter. We moved him around some, and I don't think he was comfortable in the pocket, which allowed us to intercept the ball and then forced him into some errant throws for what he's done this year, because he's been really, really good.
Mitch, it's an interesting thing because you think about this team losing to fill-in-the-blank state a couple of weeks ago at home. What was
USA,
it?
South Alabama.
South Alabama. You lose to USA by you get tuned up by them, too. It wasn't even like, whoops, they got a fumble late. They beat you up, and then you beat the Big 12 champs from last year. That's what you tell your team in the locker room. I'm certain that's part of the message, and they've got a long way to go, but Mike Gundy knows how to get his guys ready for the rest of a long season like this, so watch out for the Oklahoma State Cowboys. All right, let's take a break. We'll come back. Around the corner, we've got our Four Corners Whiparound, the teams that are going to be joining the Big 12 next year, how they've performed over the weekend here, including the byes. But, man, it was still a big W for Utah over the weekend. So stay right here with us. It is 97.5 the KSL Sports Zone and KSL News Radio. It is First and 12. Mitch Harper, Alex Kirry, stay with us.
The following is a presentation of KSL Sports. First and 12. A total roundup of this weekend's BYU football and the new look Big 12 Conference. First and 12 is sponsored by Macy's Grocery Store. Your hosts are Mitch Harper and Alex Kirry on KSL News Radio and the KSL Sports Zone.
I gotta say, Alex, it feels like Big 12 football is becoming a reality sitcom where you get a host that just says, expect the unexpected or something like that. That's just what this league is every single week. And I think it's only going to continue in the future when it becomes the 16-team iteration of the league. And that's why now we go to our four-corner check-in by looking at the future members of the league.
The Four Corners Whiparound. We check on future Big 12 opponents and rivals from the Four Corners.
Let's go non-football, but the most local and the most insane news I've ever seen. When we got the press release this week, Mitch, I think we all kind of collectively looked at each other and said, what? They said, don't tell anybody, but in about 3 hours, we're going to announce that every football scholarship player at the University of Utah is going to get themselves a truck as part of the Crimson Collective and part of their partnership now that they have going with an online streaming or online app service that they have to be able to access for their athletes. It's such an interesting thing too, Mitch, because we're sitting there and we're going, is this real? And I guess at some point we got to look at each other and go, can we even ask that question anymore when it comes to NIL? I would say out of all the deals that have been rolled out of all the most visible things that have happened across the country and how much money is being thrown around, because some of it's done quietly, but the University of Utah announcing that every scholarship player is going to get a truck. Here's Mark Harlan talking about that moment and what the commitment is. If you were wondering what the collective commitment is to these players, here was the moment where they honored the kids getting all of those trucks there at Rice Eccles Stadium.
And I want to make it really clear in front of these incredible young men and others in the department that compete. This is the priority of the athletic department, to have the Crimson Collective at a level that these guys deserve, because everybody loves the top 10 program, right?
Is that immediately going to just be, are kids signing up going, I want a truck, man. That's where I'm going right now.
I don't think so, but I got to say it's a nice luxury for these guys that, do go to Utah and play there, and they're going to have a fully loaded 2024 Dodge Ram truck leased out, and as long as they're there,
right,
they got that truck. Like, that's a nice perk to just have that. Now, and from what I understand too, they'll probably have some other perks with the truck as well. So it is what college football is about today, and it's just ironic too, because you think, what was it, SMU? They got shut down because of cars, gold Trans Ams,
right.
and now
for one guy,
and now 85 scholarship players are getting
Insane.
A truck. I think it's awesome, but at the same time, you just wonder, is that really going to see a huge boost in recruiting? Because
I don't know.
I still think at the end of the day, cash is going to win all when it comes to these sort of NIL deals, and there's always in the SEC these bag men that are ready to just unload the cash, and now it can go above board, and you can frame it as some sort of endorsement. But I think what's going to be interesting, though, Alex, when it comes to NIL is that now we're starting to see a wave of high school recruits that are signing with programs where they've had a kind of a couple cycles where as high school recruits in some states, depending on the rules behind that and the legislation, they can make money as high school athletes. So you wonder if it'll get to a point where that's not really at point of mind for as many recruits. Like, yes, everyone's going to want some sort of money, but like it felt like the last couple cycles, because it was so new, the opportunities were so new, businesses were looking to get in. You just felt that, everyone's just looking for the direct bag and try to get theirs. But going forward, I think it slows down a little bit at some point. But the creativity, though, in these NIL deals, I think it's only going to continue to ramp up with these teams trying to find ways to get some sort of edge and put their program in a spotlight, because that's what Utah did. I mean, this was garnering national news this week.
I would imagine. Can you imagine the moment when one of these guys gets stuck in the snow and he calls one of his other, hey man, could you pull me out? And then 84 other trucks come over the hill to save the day. I mean, just like the amount of hilarity that comes along with it. And my wife did. She goes, "What's that parking lot going to look like up at the practice facility?" You go, a lot of red, a lot of white, a lot of black trucks, and like you're just going to see. But you know what? The pictures of those kids on the field.
Awesome.
I hope that they really kept that secret from everybody. I really did. It looked like they were all pretty surprised, genuinely. So I was pumped for those kids, and I love that kind of stuff. That's the stuff that makes me really, really excited. Okay, Colorado. We were waiting for the Buffs to get another embarrassing loss to add to it, but man, Prime teaching these guys some resiliency and coming back, and they end up getting the W, and they don't take an embarrassing loss against Kenny Dillingham and the Arizona State. And the Arizona State Sun Devils, who actually put up not just a game, but I would say those guys are fighting for their lives, and they're doing a heck of a job. They just come up short against the Buffs.
How weird was it for you, Alex, growing up watching probably some Big 8, Big 12 games back in the day, growing up in Texas, to think Colorado, Arizona State's a future Big 12 game? I just think, wow, this is the world we're living in now. But yes, it was a good win for Colorado. 4-2 now are the Buffs, and they had a late, 12 seconds left in the game. Alejandro Mata buries a 43-yard field goal. What was crazy too was Arizona State burned a timeout, and the first attempt, it negated the first attempt, which was a miss. And so sometimes calling those timeouts can backfire, but then Mata stepped up and buried it. It was the one game, though, where Coach Prime and his Buffs were completely off the grid because, well, it was on Pac-12 Network, so no one saw it.
Nope.
And that's going to be something that's definitely going to be changing. I guarantee Brett Yormark is already thinking up ways to get Coach Prime just in the spotlight the moment he's done with Colorado or with the Pac-12 and joins the Big 12 next August, because it just seems like Coach Prime will be a perfect fit in this new Big 12 that's looking to attract a younger, hipper demographic and really engage with people on social media.
So interestingly enough, Vegas had the odds at between 3.5 and 4 games for the over/under on wins for Colorado, even with all the pub that came with it. They're 4-2. You could say what you want about Colorado, the dream being smashed, or what was it that Dan Lanning said? He was like, the honeymoon's over for this team. And it may be. I mean, honestly, they've got a rough go the next few weeks, but I feel bad for Arizona State because they're 1-5, and they're just, Kenny Dillingham has some talented guys on that thing, and they just are finding ways to fight during these games, and they just do not have what it takes. But they also outgained Colorado by more than 100 yards on the offensive side of things. They held Shedeur Sanders to 230 yards passing. I mean, it was as good of a showing defensively against Colorado as anybody's had all year, and no one cares because it's Arizona State. But I'm one of those guys that's going, hey, I want the league to be strong going forward, the Big 12. I don't want to see Arizona State, just like absolutely hit a stride of garbage, as they start to go in there, especially with kids that weren't part of the problem going forward. So that was the bummer.
Does part of you wish the Big 12 would have gone for Washington State or Oregon State instead of ASU? Now, that might be just kind of revisionist history now, seeing what's happened this season. I know Washington State lost to UCLA yesterday, but do you almost think they would have been better fits? Because it seems like ASU just has no interest in the Big 12 at all. Like they just have no energy.
You could maybe say that about a couple other teams that are coming in, right, who act like they're too good for the league. But I think in terms of brand recognition of teams coming in, just like a straight-up brand play, I think Arizona State is always going to outduel Washington State and Oregon State when it comes to that. Like right now, your team's playing well. Washington State, obviously, they took their first loss today, but when you talk about like Oregon State and Washington State, just from like if we're going to straight up say it, like a brand sex appeal situation, Arizona State's always going to win that one out. And I think Brett Yormark would say the same thing because he's a brand guy.
That he is.
I don't know if you know that about him.
He loves his brands, and
goodness.
we love having that Four Corners whip around every single week. And if you miss any part of the show, you can subscribe to the podcast First and 12 on KSLSports.com. We'll look ahead to what's next in the Big 12 as we take our final timeout here on First and 12, and it's powered by KSL Sports.
Read all the stories about BYU sports no one else has heard. Go to KSLSports.com for exclusive columns by BYU insider Mitch Harper. That's KSLSports.com.
All right, everybody, welcome back. It is First and 12 right here on KSL News Radio, also heard on the KSL Sports Zone every Sunday and also via podcast. Anywhere podcasts you love can be found, they are going to be right there. Mitch Harper, Alex Kirry. It's a bye week for BYU, which means we didn't have a lot of games to break down, but we certainly had a lot of actual games across the Big 12 to break down, and that's what we're going to do right now. All of it brought to you by the folks at Macy's. Happy shopping. Proud to have them as sponsors of First and 12, your local grocers who bring you the freshest fruits and vegetables. Macy's. Happy shopping. Let's get into our week ahead and what the schedule looks like for the rest of the Big 12 next week.
The week ahead. Matchups that have us the most excited about the week to come in the Big 12.
How about this one, Alex? Thursday night, the Dana Holgerson Bowl. West Virginia goes to Houston, 5 p.m. on FS1. If there's a game where Houston can rise up, maybe it's this one for their head coach as he goes up against his old team.
Well, and not only that, like just based off of what we've seen by the Big 12 the rest of the way, of course Houston's going to blow out West Virginia, right? Like just based off of any of the guesses. I mean, just knowing that we have no clue what's going to happen in a lot of these games, and a Thursday game feels really weird for a Big 12 matchup. But Houston's like, no, we do Thursday games. Come on, we do this all the time. West Virginia's like, we haven't done this in a long time, and I'll tell you, this is an interesting game because Dana Holgerson. It's not just about getting back that old team, getting back into his old team he used to be the head coach of. I think it's also like, hey, man, people are not taking me seriously right now. And if there's anybody, this other guy, Neil Brown's supposed to be on the hot seat, but it's me on the hot seat, Dana Holgerson, the secret. So you're hosting one at home. That could be your first Big 12 win in the conference. Boy, they need it. And Houston, it's a game that they really, really need. And it's a Thursday matchup, which is always kind of weird as well. You got a lot of teams who are going to be sitting out. They didn't take their buys this week. They're going to do it. They're going to do it the upcoming week, and then everybody else who was taking a break is going to be playing again next week. Mitch, we've got quite the slate here.
We do, and Saturday morning it starts with Iowa State at Cincinnati, 10 a.m. FS1. A lot of FS1 games this weekend because MLB playoffs will be taking over network TV. So a lot of the Big 12 action will relegate to FS1, but Cyclones and Bearcats, Cyclones look to keep their win streak going after that big win over TCU.
Two rivals or two mascots who are nebulous. No one knows a lot about a Cyclone or a Bearcat, but there they are facing off against one another. Kansas and Oklahoma State, this is an interesting one. This is underrated, too, because they're going to be kicking off around the same time BYU and TCU do, but Kansas and Oklahoma State, that's a game where Mike Gundy could go, we're just going to absolutely shock everybody. You could see both teams at the end of that game with two losses. Oklahoma State could go to 4-2. Kansas could go to 5-2 on the year, and I wouldn't be a bit surprised because it's in Stillwater.
And, yeah, so I was going to say it's in Stillwater. That's one of the big pieces here because they seem to play better, Oklahoma State does, unless they're playing USA, America's team, South Alabama. They seem to play better in Stillwater. The nightcap game, before we get to BYU, Kansas State at Texas Tech, 5 p.m., feels kind of like a real – if either one of these teams are going to be a threat at all in the Big 12 race, this is a must-win for both of those teams.
Yeah,
it feels like.
And Texas Tech is kind of in that moment right now where they're like, hey, we're finding ourselves a little bit. And Kansas State's licking their wounds, and they're going to Lubbock. And so this one you could really see these guys. You talk about our power rankings. If you missed any of them, you can go back and listen to the podcast of our first segment of this hour. But Texas Tech is on the rise, and Kansas State falling the other direction. And really, again, based off of what we've seen the rest of the year, of course, Texas Tech blowing out Kansas State or the other way around, throw it up in the air. I have no clue. I mean, a lot of these teams right now. Look at these records. BYU and Kansas are the only teams with only one loss on Saturday playing. West Virginia, BYU, and Kansas all with just one loss right now, just like you planned, right? TCU 3-3, Iowa State 3-3, Cincinnati's 2-3, Oklahoma State's 3-2. Kansas State and Texas Tech are both 3-2 and 3-3 respectively. I mean, it's absolutely beating each other up across the board in this conference, and frankly, I'm here for all of it. I want to see just absolute mayhem. Who cares? I mean, are people really going, I want to see a representative from the conference going to the Big 12 or going to the college football playoff? It's like, I don't care. I want to see these teams go at it and fight for who's going to be the top of this league, because next year it's not going to be Oklahoma or Texas. So somebody show me what you got here. And this next week is obviously going to be one to prove that. And TCU hosting BYU is, of course, the big one for us folks here locally.
Yeah, 1:30 kick. Extended pregame begins at 11 a.m. from Fort Worth on KSL News Radio. TV broadcast will be on ESPN, but the whole call will be here on the legacy home of the Cougars, KSL News Radio. And, this is a good game. It's a good matchup, a historical conference rival matchup. I was thinking about it, Alex. These teams last played in a conference in 2010, and it just blows me away to think that's been 13 years ago for incoming, freshmen that just, got to Fort Worth or got to Provo this fall. They were about 5 years old when the last time these two teams, those students, it's been a long time, longer than we think. So maybe the older crowd respects that rivalry like us, but maybe some of the younger folks don't really appreciate how good of a series that truly was back in the Mountain West days. But I think in this Big 12 era, this has the makings to be the beginning of a good matchup too. And I do think that BYU, this is going to be a critical line of scrimmage game because TCU still has speed, particularly at their linebacker position and in the secondary. Can BYU win in the trenches? And that's going to be a challenge for them. And I think that's going to be something that I'm really watching closely because BYU wins in the trenches. They can beat anyone in this league, not named Texas and Oklahoma. Yeah. So I think if they can win that battle, that's going to give them a great shot to pull off the win here.
I was going to say too, you and I've had this discussion. I actually had a discussion a little bit with a guy with a couple of friends who went out to the Kansas game just as fans. And they said, man, it was awesome. Kansas fans were like, hey, we are so glad you guys are in the Big 12. And so far it's been a lot of handshaking. And you and I both commented, it'll be interesting to see how these other teams are like, okay, how are we supposed to treat BYU here? Are they a rival? And they're new. We kind of like them. We kind of hate them. There's all sorts of weird stuff here. We don't really know these guys very well. That is not a question with TCU. TCU's like, oh, no, we have the BYU hate down already. We are fine. We know how – there's a reason why you can't make it to this game, right, if you're a BYU fan. The secondary market for tickets is going to be difficult because they're actually hunting down season ticket holders for trying to get rid of their tickets to sell to BYU fans. They will make sure that those guys get punished. They'll be punitive to people who are giving their tickets to BYU fans or selling their tickets to BYU fans. That's how little they want to see BYU blue in the stands down in Fort Worth.
Yeah, because the secondary market the prices are getting pretty cheap too, and I did look into this. SeatGeek apparently is the one area where there's a little bit of a loophole. So if BYU fans want to hit SeatGeek up, that's kind of the secondary.
Paid by SeatGeek now? You getting a Ram truck from SeatGeek?
I know, but I just hey, just a pro tip there, Cougar fans. That's the spot if you want to be showing that blue down in Fort Worth.
They're hitting it up.
You know they are because the tickets are as low as $20 now, and Cougar fans, they are going to fill the stands, and I think it's just going to be a fun match because I remember back in the day too. Remember when Gary Patterson put BYU helmets on the tackling dummies leading up to that 2008 game? It was intense. I mean, you can really point to TCU's ascent in college football at the moments where they took down BYU, and then they had those heated battles with Utah. I mean, that was some great football during that stretch, and to see that back is awesome. I think both you and I we're really excited to see this series continue because, man, this has been something that's been missing, too, for BYU, is just playing a game against not a traditional in-state foe, but there's a series that has some juice to it because BYU hasn't had this in more than a decade. And even Sonny Dykes at Big 12 Media Day said, man, I have a lot of respect for BYU. Like, both of these programs have similar program arcs where they were these underdogs and they defied the odds and they've relied on good offenses, but also have had some really strong defenses. I mean, those TCU defenses with Gary Patterson were outstanding back in the day with Jerry Hughes.
Yeah.
And, man, they were good. So I love this matchup from a historical kind of nostalgic perspective, but I think the on-field product's going to be pretty fun too.
This is where the meme of Carl Weathers and Arnold Schwarzenegger coming together with the two hands, BYU and Utah fans going, here's our hate for TCU. It's the one thing we can get together on for this one. All right, Mitch, you and I will also perform that same meme right now and end the program. So another 1st and 12 in the books, man. This is fun. It's going to be even more fun. You're going to be down in Fort Worth. I'll be doing the pregame right here from the KSL Sports Zone studios in Salt Lake. Extended pregame from you and Matt Baiamonte as well. Everything is covered across the world of KSL Sports, so join us then. Download the podcast 1st and 12 wherever it's found. For Mitch Harper, I'm Alex Kirry. Thanks for joining us. We'll be back again for another edition of 1st and 12 next week, and we'll see you then.